I remember those days when I was watching First Man. You probably don't know him because he's like a self-improvement YouTuber. He's more like on red pill type of shit, you know, like dating women and so on, maybe improving yourself as a man in general and so on. And he had really great mindset videos. And I remember like yesterday one video which was like straight 7 system, and I'm actually gonna explain today's video what is it and how to actually implement the same technique, the mindset as a VAter, and how to actually become that top 1% VAter in general. So let's get into the video. For example, there are two guys, right? For example, that's you, and there's another guy, right? Like, let's make him a little bit bigger to have like a hair a little bit maybe, yeah. And so this is you, for example, and this is another guy, random guy, right? Your competitor, basically. Let's say we're comparing both of you on SMV, for example, right? This is like sexual market value, how high value man are you, and so on. So basically, there are like, I think like 5 pillars, and I don't know how many, but basically I'm gonna say there are 3 pillars in order to become like better like in the dating market and so on. So the first pillar is how attractive are you, right? And for example, you are like shorter, so you're not so attractive and so on. So basically, let's say 5 out of 10, okay? Like it's average score, obviously. And for example, this guy is maybe 8 out of 10, right? And maybe he's like a Chad, like his genetics are really good and so on. Maybe let's say money. This is like a really important topic to, like, we are just focusing also as VAters to make money and grind and so on. And for example, you're kind of rich, to be honest, and for example you have like 8, right, out of 10. But let's say he's kind of broke, but let's say he's kind of handsome and so on, so he's probably in debt or something like that. So let's say he's 3 out of 10, right? And for example, the last pillar would be like the way you communicate or something like that. So let's say communication would be like for you 7, because we need to communicate really well actually as VAters, so like that's really important. And actually let's delete this from my last video real quick so you don't like get confused. And so for example, this jock, like the chat guy, right? His communication skills are like 5, for example, right? And let's just count it down, right? And the average of both of you is, for example, this guy is 11, 16, I suppose, out of 30. That's like about 55% out of 100, right? And for example, this guy is like 55. And for example, you are like 14, 21 out of 30, right? Let's say 66 about, right? That's like an average that I just calculated in my mind. And for example, your SMV, your aka your sexual market value, is higher by 11 points, which is like 11% basically. And this is kind of like good because you're richer than him. As you can see, you're richer than him. Your communications are like quite good, like quite better, but he's still like handsome. So you would say, oh yeah, he's still better because he's handsome. But when we actually introduce more criteria such as money or communication or any other skills, that, like, for example, what clothing are you buying, what location are you living, and so on. So there's like a lot of criteria to count in. But for example, if you count these off criteria, right, as you can see, you are just better man, like in a sexual market value. Like it's like a black type of red pill type of shit. And this is not what I'm supposed to learn. And so you may ask, how do we implement this into editing? And so I got the answer for you, my guy. For example, one video is like, let's say video 1, right, E1, and E2, editor 2, right? And for example, there are 7 main pillars that decides whether or not you are a good VAter. So the first pillar is obviously your editing ability. Like that's the most important task as a VAter, to just have like good edits and so on. So the next one is actually your branding, like your image as a VAter and so on the internet. Then your previous clients, right? Like your previous clients, how big are they and how influential they are in your space, like in the niche, like the, for example, gaming niche, or for example, finance niche, or any other niche, for example, right? And obviously, the next one is communication, and after there is like time and energy, right? Energy and time, right? And now let's compare you both with these criteria, right? And let's say you're like decent video editor, but you're not the best video editor. But this second guy, right? He can make like Sigma Male Grindset type of videos, like with these cool like transitions and everything. Maybe he's that anime guy who can make like crazy animations and smooth like a whole video and so on. And for example, he's like top 1 video editor, like in terms of editing ability, and so he's like 9 out of 10. And for example, you, my guy, you're like decent video editor, you know, like 7 out of 10. You're like not in top 1% video editor in ability, right? But you're like top 20 or something like that. So it's really great score. It's like 7 out of 10. And you can do pretty much what client asks. So you're not in big trouble. So why not? And for example, your branding is like also like 7 out of 10. For example, your persona, maybe you teach and give valuable content for video editors, like giveaways or something like that. Like actually don't do giveaways on Twitter because they kind of useless, to be honest. And for example, this guy, right? He has like 5 out of 10 branding, right? He has actually a Twitter account, and so he's like a good spot, but like he's actually not so active in it, so it was kind of useless to actually create Twitter, so it's kind of meh, I would just say, right? For example, your previous clients were like 1,000, 100,000, like small YouTubers, like, you know, 100,000 is like quite a big YouTuber, but it's not like 20 million creator who's gonna pay you like millions of dollars or something like that, so it's not like a kind of big deal. Like you're not like in top 1% who is working with like top 1% creators. So like yeah, I'm working with 200,000 subscriber client and so on. So yeah, my previous clients are decent, so you can actually trust me. So I would say 7 out of 10, like for example, right? And this guy, right? He doesn't have like previous clients, for example, I just say. Maybe he has some random YouTubers or that are like below 100 subscriber, or maybe some TikToker who is not gonna actually pay you, and so they're kind of low quality clients. So I would say he's like 3 out of 10. He's like in shambles right now. And for example, communication, right? You can communicate really great if you obviously read this book, right? I'm gonna recommend this book like forever. How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like, read this book, my guy. I'm gonna advertise this book like every single video, so you just have to read this book to actually understand how to communicate as a creator and how to implement and manipulate people, I just say. And for example, if you read this book, right, and you implement these steps like every single time, your like score will be obviously 7 out of 10 like at default. And for example, this guy haven't read this book, right? Like this book, right? For example, his skills like are like pretty shambles, to be honest, like 4 out of 10, right? So the next things are energy and time. For example, you're kind of great with your workflow and how to spend energy on certain things, how to optimize this and optimize this and so on. For example, you're kind of great, like you're like 7 straight 7, right? And for example, this guy is like kind of great also, but he could do better. For example, and he scores like 6 out of 10, you know, it's like 5 out of 10 because he spent a lot of time on those edits, for example, and he's not so efficient with it. I actually forgot to include portfolio. And for example, your portfolio is really great, right? And it's like decent portfolio, just like your branding, right? And for example, your portfolio is like really easy to understand, and you have actual legitimate videos that you edited for your clients and so on. For example, this guy, right? He doesn't even have a portfolio, for example. And maybe he has like Google Drive link. Oh, guys, I have a Google Drive link. You can watch there all my Sigma Male hardworking type of video edits, right? Like, man, it's not gonna work. Like, you don't even have a portfolio. Like, I can give you like 2 out of 10, maybe. Okay, fair enough, you have a Google Drive link, but I don't like Google Drive links, like, they suck, mate. Just dedicate some time and actually create portfolio, my guy, goddamn. And now let's determine who's the actual better video editor, who's gonna actually land, for example, $1,000 paying client, right? Per video, for example, right? Per video. And who's gonna actually land this client, right? Video editor number 1. Or video editor number 2. For example, editor number 1, right? And his average score out of 10 is obviously 7 because there's only 7s, right? And for example, this video editor, right? And his average score is 4.8. Most likely video editor number 1. Because in general, he's better in branding, in previous clients, in communication, energy, time, and obviously your portfolio. And it actually doesn't matter if whether or not this video editor can do Sigma Male type of edits and you cannot, because you have all these things, like, and when you count these things up, right, your score is 7. But when you count these things up, his score is 4.8. And obviously you're gonna land this 1000 per video type of client, right? Not this guy, for example, right? For example, there's another Viator that you want to compare, right? Maybe this Viator, right, is like kind of great in all areas, but he's maybe lacking in one area, right? For example, he's like editing ability, right, is let's say kind of bad, and he's like 3 out of 10. He cannot do actually the most important work as a Viator. And for example, his branding is kind of also shit because his actual editing ability is kind of shit, so he cannot actually show the work that he has. And for example, his branding is like also like 4 out of 10, right? And for example, his previous clients are kind of also shit, right? 4 out of 10. But for example, this guy is like suddenly great at communication, right? He's like 10 out of 10, like in communication. Goddamn, mate. Like, for example, he's like really great and so on. And maybe he has like 10 out of 10, like energy for some reason, right? And maybe he's also like great at time management, right? And so on. And for example, he's like 10 out of 10, right? And his portfolio is also great. Like, he's optimized his portfolio to the teeth, right? And for example, his like portfolio is like 9 out of 10, right? Like, in general, like this guy has like 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10. But for example, you have like 7, 7, 7, like you're like decent, but this guy is like nailing these things up. But and for example, his average score is like about 7 also, 0.1 I think when I calculated. When we compare like that, right? Probably this guy is gonna actually get this 1000 paying client, right? But he has a really big problem, which is, for example, his video editing ability, right, is shit. And as Viators, we know that editing ability is our #1 skill that we can actually master and we have to master. And for example, these are like top 3 priorities that you need to nail. And for example, he's like bad at it, then probably he's not gonna get that 1000 paying client. Because you're decent at all of these like things, for example, right? You're not like good at, for example, editing ability, like you're not so good. But when, for example, compare like 100 other Viators, right, who has like a decent at this thing, maybe he's decent in communication, maybe he has a decent portfolio, but maybe he has like bad branding, maybe he's not so active in Twitter and so on. And my main point from this video is actually be just great at all things, right? Just be decent at it. And be like just 7 out of 10 in all things, for example, right? All these 7 pillars, right? It's okay to not be like 10 out of 10 in all these things, right? Because it's actually not possible, and it's not like recommended to be, for example, in one thing good, like for example, your editing ability, and be shit at all of these, because you're actually shit in all of these important things as Viators that makes us good Viators, so on. So actually be like 10 out of 10, not like 10 out of 10 and then after like 1 out of 10, 3 out of 10, right? And so on. Just be like 7, 7, 7, right? And that makes him to outstand as a Viator. And in general, for example, there's like 1000 Viators. For example, this is client, right? For example, this is client, right? This is your client. This is like your target, your actual dream client, for example. And for example, there's like Viators, right? Like these red things, right? There's like 1, 2, 3, I don't know, like many Viators, right? And for example, this is you, right? Just for example, right? And for example, your score in general is like 7 out of 10. And for example, this guy, right? He's good at editing ability, right? And his score in general is like in total, but his total score is like 5 out of 10, right? And this guy is like good at communication, but in general, he's kind of shit in all areas, so he's like 4 out of 10, right? And so on, right? There's like, he's good at this, he's good at this, but he's good at this, and maybe he's good at this, like. But in general, you, my guy, you are like good at all areas. And guess what? Who's actually gonna get this client? Not this guy, not this guy, not this guy, not this, not this, not this. You, my guy, you're gonna get this client because he sees that you're good, like decent at all of these areas, right? As you can see, you're good at this, you're good at this, you're good at this. I hope you got the point, right? And that's how you actually become a top 1% Viator. And so if you get any value from this video, then make sure to subscribe, because by the end of this year, I want to have 1000 people to level up their editing game. And thank you for watching this video, and see you later. Peace.